80% of the startups fail by the fourth year. What could be some causes? Is there a connection between success and leadership in startups? How do startup founders deal with leadership issues? On today's episode of the Suraahi Podcast, we present a thought provoking conversation on the importance of leadership in startups.
The fact that a startup environment, which is, you know, on steroids because there's a lot of money that's been pumped in by investors and there's an expectation of very good quality returns, very early returns. It is a heady cocktail for failure. There's a lot of push and pressure to succeed. And this, coupled with the lack of leadership experience, makes for a very difficult situation for them to manage. So, leadership pitfalls are very frequent and very obvious in startups.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Suraahi Podcast, where we bring to you teacups of wisdom and interesting stories from across the world. We hope this podcast will support you like a good companion on your journey. On today's episode, Vu Dinh, the director of Vernalis EU, interviews Mr. Bharat Grover, co-founder Vernalis Consulting and chairman ETEK International.
Hello, everybody. We're pleased to host today Bharat Grover, partner at Vernalis Consulting, to share his experience on leadership and startups. So, Bharat, welcome. And could you please tell us a few words on Vernalis Consulting and your professional background?
Thank you, Kim. Happy to join you here. Vernalis Consulting is a 25-year-old consulting firm. For the bulk of our history, we've worked with large companies. However, in the past 5-7 years, we've had the good fortune of working with startups. And while we have worked with companies on all sorts of assignments, from turnarounds to transformations, leadership development, with startups, it's been a very interesting journey as well, with a variety of assignments. I'm a physicist by training, and I got into strategy consulting and leadership consulting quite by accident, but I'm enjoying it here.
Love to hear that. So, Bharat, what kind of startups have you worked for, and what kind of industry they were operating in? What was their business proposal? Please tell us, illustrate a few of those experiences.
Yeah, Kim, it's a little difficult to categorize all the startups that we worked with into a single or neatly defined category.
Yeah.
It's a very eclectic mix where some of them have been working with the agri-tech sector, one of them has been in the quick commerce sector, another one is in democratizing sports by bringing sports at your doorstep. One of them is in EdTech. So a whole variety of them. A wide range, Kim. A very wide range.
Okay. Interesting. So, but drawing from those experiences, what would you say, are the main pitfalls in terms of leadership, which those startups should avoid? I mean, anyone who is launching a startup today, and what would you advise on these aspects?
Interesting question, Kim. Kim, as you know, most startups are helmed by young professionals. Sometimes they are helmed by experienced professionals, but for most part, these are technocrats, people who have expertise in maybe some area of engineering, and it's a passion for that which brings them to launch this company with a couple of friends. Most don't have leadership experience.
Yeah.
And this, coupled with the fact that a startup environment, which is, on steroids because there's a lot of money that's been pumped in by these investors, and there's an expectation of very good quality returns, very early returns. It is a heady cocktail for failure. There's a lot of push and pressure to succeed. And this, coupled with the lack of leadership experience, makes for a very difficult situation for them to manage. So leadership pitfalls are very frequent and very obvious to in startups?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you said, there's a lot of challenge for startups. I mean, we hear that 80% of startups don't go further than the fourth year. I mean, that's a big death rate. So obviously, the leaders of these startups have a vital role in the survival and growth. And as you said, they're not always experienced leaders. So, what would your advice be on the first steps of leadership as they recruit, for example, as they delegate? What would be your advice to grow in that competence of leader?
One clear lacuna or one clear area of improvement or pitfall that we see is that they are too technology focused. There's a lot of emphasis on tech and correspondingly a low emphasis on organization building. That deficit is something which is not even recognized. The entire push and prowess is directed towards improving the tech and the product, whereas the systems, the processes, the people, the hiring, these are areas which are equally important, if not more. The recruitment is done in a very, very casual manner. Team meetings are done in a very, very inefficient way. And just if I were to expand on this very simple point that, if your meetings are ineffective and they tend to drag, there's a lot of repetition and they're known to be unproductive, it creates a lot of dissatisfaction and demotivation in the team. So there is no incentive to meet again, and therefore matters stop getting discussed and they start stagnating. As simple as thing as running a meeting effectively can be a stumbling block for a startup. And this is not something which can be overlooked or in any way underemphasized, simply because they don't have any experience of what a good meeting looks like and how much more productive meetings can be. So how do we really improve them? How do we really show them that meetings can be so much more productive? These are, I've just talked of two, for example, ad hoc recruitment and poor quality of meetings. But there are many more aspects of leadership which come to play in a startup, for which they have not been either trained or there's no feedback mechanism to to help them improve on.
And yet, do you think it's possible to grow in competence on those leadership matters, and at the same time, grow the core business? I mean, how do you do it? How do you learn and at the same time focus on your growth?
A very good point, Kim. I agree with you that leadership, it's like wine. It takes time to age and grow, and one needs to grow into it. It's not going to happen instantly or overnight, but at the same time, it is definitely something on which people can grow. We have seen startups grow. We've seen leaders and entrepreneurs grow into statured, mature, intelligent leaders. So we've seen that happen, but it takes time. It takes a couple of years. In the meantime, what should a startup founder do? What should the startup team do? I feel that a fact which is very well known in the startup world is to take the help of mentors. Now, while this is something which is very prevalent using mentors, it is the quality of relationship with the mentor which actually determines how well we can use a mentor. If the quality of relationship and the nature of relationship is distant or limited to strategic inputs, then the mentor remains a distant figure. He is operating somewhere in the background as a remote piece of action. However, if the quality of relationship between the mentor and the startup founders becomes better, then the mentor starts coming into the equation much more, and he is accessed on a wide variety of issues, not just on strategy or in times of crisis, but on a more continual basis. And I think it is this guidance and this combination of experience along with the dynamism and energy of the founders that leads to a certain balance and harmony, which creates a very good playing ground for the startup to succeed.
So typically, could you elaborate a little bit? I mean, is there some illustration example you could give us of a startup being sort of stuck on that path of leadership growth, and that typically you help to mature, or working with them, some change came along?
Definitely, I may not want to take some names, but in general, you find that even the equation between founders is not always very harmonious. The presence of a mentor kind of balances many of these factors. It improves the listening. It creates a role model for the founders, and as the founders interact more with the mentor, there's a takeaway in terms of behavioral maturity that is reflected in their meetings with their subordinates. So we found that in a couple of cases that we have worked with, that Vernalis has worked with, the feedback that has come is that, along with strategy, we felt that you role modeled the way for us to behave with our subordinates, to behave with ourselves, to be a patient person, to investigate, to be objective, to work with data. These are some of the feedback points that have come back to me and to my colleagues at Vernalis, and which kind of gives us a clue that they have been adopting these behaviors, and these behaviors have also started reflecting in their behavior. So we can see that they are trying to adopt these behaviors very actively, and we have seen that in some of these cases, the meetings have become productive. And as you know, if the meetings are productive, that's when issues get discussed and solved.
Right.
And if issues are not getting discussed and solved, there's no way for the organization to move forward. And the fact that issues are getting solved means that the organization can progress. And we've seen remarkable progress in some cases, remarkable. 10x would be an understatement for some of the growths that we have seen.
I think it'll be interesting for both the leaders and the investors and their partners, the managers, to be aware of what are the signs they should be looking out for, that somewhere on the leadership journey something is stuck or needs to be improved. What are the signs that they should be looking out for? Can you name some of those? Can you give us some examples?
Sure. 2 or 3 things which are behavioral triggers for us. One of them is the quality of structure that they bring to a conversation. If the conversation is structured and planned, it kind of is very reassuring. The second is thread connect. When you are conversing with a person, what kind of focus can be seen in the conversation? Is a particular thread that has been raised, is it being held on to, or is there a whole lot of hyperlinking that's happening? A certain degree of hyperlinking is acceptable, but if it becomes, if it crosses a certain point and the linking becomes so intense as that the original thread is forgotten, then clearly there is no way that the original thread will ever be completed. That's another red flag. A third red flag, which is of great concern, is the quality of listening. And I want to elaborate on this. I can listen to understand, and I can listen to counter. If I'm listening only to counter, then it clearly means that there is a lack of open-mindedness within me. And if I'm not open-minded as a leader, then my ability to get ideas beyond me is compromised. I will never be able to go beyond my ideas. I will never be able to see my limitations. So if I'm listening only to counter, or I'm unable to listen to contrary viewpoints, then that's a huge red flag in a conversation.
That's a big sign.
If we are able to see patterns, clear patterns about poor structure, poor listening to contrary opinions, then certainly it's a cause of concern.
So typically what you're talking about, does that come up in the relationship between, let's say, the more operational level of people involved with startup and the management leaders? Is that also, have you seen examples where the operational level people are trying to express some concerns which are not being taken into account by the leaders?
Kim, if I'm a poor listener, then I'm a poor listener in all situations, except in very few situations where I'm listening to people with very high credibility, in which case, I surmount my poor listening, but otherwise I tend to remain a poor listener. Similarly, if my focus is poor, then my thread connect is low. I'm unable to hold on to a single idea. I tend to hyperlink a lot. And likewise, if I'm not used to planning an outcome or planning and a particular conversation, then I tend to be unstructured. I tend to move in ad hoc. I tend to jump around a lot, and the outcomes are not met. So clearly, this is not something which is limited only to the operational conversation, but it is a leitmotif. It's a signature,
Okay.
and it's a behavioral pattern that is reflected across.
So on the contrary, what are the good signs for you of structure in this startup? That there are signs of maturity in the leadership.
A very, very good sign of humility is asking questions, seeking to understand, going beyond one's position, exploring contrary positions, showing patience in exploration and understanding contrary viewpoints, seeking feedback. These are some behaviors which are outstanding behaviors of maturity. And of course, this is rare, and it's very acceptably rare because it takes a long time for us to develop these. And there are some young professionals, young entrepreneurs who have these qualities in abundance. But I guess that typically an energetic entrepreneur, a dynamic entrepreneur who's gung-ho about an idea, can acceptably poor on these. Be poor on these. It is here that working with the mentor or working with at least one partner who kind of compensates for these is very useful.
Okay, so in this situation, what are for you the main qualities a mentor should have and should bring to the startup leaders?
That's a good one, Kim. I feel firstly the mentor needs to be a well-rounded individual. Well-rounded because the mentorship role itself is a complex role. You need to be able to move effortlessly from strategy to leadership. But I think going beyond this, a good mentor is a humble person. A good mentor is not a person who tries to dominate the entrepreneurs. He's a person who can yield, who creates a playing field for the entrepreneurs to feel invited, respected, and welcomed into his fold or her fold. If you find that the entrepreneurs look forward to meeting you, they look forward to a phone call from you, they are the ones constantly trying to reach out to you, then to a certain extent you're succeeding. If the relationship is healthy, then people will reach out to you. If the relationship is not healthy, then people will tend to stay away from you. And I feel that a good mentor is a person who would create a very fertile soil for the entrepreneurs to grow and not be overshadowed by his or her competence.
So, but I think it'll be interesting for budding entrepreneurs to know really what stage they are on the leadership journey from startup to mature enterprise, mature company. So, could you walk us briefly through the different stages of leadership that a startup leader will go through on that journey?
Kim, I feel that that question may not have a clean answer because there are entrepreneurs of all sorts. You have met entrepreneurs within a team, within a single startup, who are at different points of the leadership journey. Some who are very mature, some who are extremely immature, untrusting, suspicious, some who are very calm, very, very equanimous. So I feel that there would be no single method by which we could categorize them all. Of course, each one would have different aspects to grow into as a leader. There are people with a tremendous amount of energy, and they would need to bring in patience and equanimity into their style, into their uh, set of leadership qualities. And equally, there would be people who have a lot of patience, a lot of equanimity, but do not have dynamism and energy. And we need to, encourage them to take risks, uh, show a motivation to step beyond their comfort zone. It's very easy for them to be in a good listening, patient listening zone, but it is difficult for them to step out of their comfort zone, take stretch targets, to motivate others, to inspire others uh, by dynamism and action. So, depending upon each person's profile, the leadership journey would be charted.
So typically, we feel that that when we talk about leadership and growth, we talk about delegation of responsibility as something that will come along. The qualities that a leader must develop. Can you tell us a few words about the importance of delegating responsibility and at what stage that's important, and how much the leader should let go according to the growth size of the company?
So, Kim, in my understanding, delegation is a very important quality, but it seems to be a very important quality in more mature organizations. In the startup world, in our understanding or in my understanding, we've not found delegation to be a stumbling block. And the reason for that is because it's a very dynamic world, and the leaders are needing to be involved rightfully in almost every activity. There are very few activities which are standardized and mature enough, or processes which are so mature that they can be delegated and the leader can be in a standby mode. Most action in the startup world is such that it involves the startup founders in some way or the other. Yes, gradually as the process is mature, there's a letting go that happens, and that happens very naturally. We've not found that delegation has been such a stumbling block or an issue in the startup world. More often than not, it is the lack of capability.
Understand that startups have lots of pressure from different sources. These can be financial pressure, technical problems, management problems. I mean, how does a leader, a young leader, deal with this pressure?
No easy answers, Kim. I mean, clearly they have not been prepared for this role. They have moved into this role without really understanding all of this, but eventually they grow into it. We haven't really seen perfect startup founders. We've seen lucky startup founders, and more or less, founders have to adapt into this role. They commit mistakes along the way and they learn along the way.
Yeah. And do you find that they the staff, the operational level team can suffer from the pressure that a leader gets?
That is very true, Kim. In fact, that is often the reality. The quality of leadership has a tremendous impact on the operations. Leaders that keep on changing directions impact the operations phenomenally. They cause a lot of demotivation by changing targets, by changing priorities, by sometimes pushing for a new product or product changes in a particular direction versus wanting to launch new products. So it's a heady mix of decision making, and it is not necessarily fair for the people reporting into them with all these changes and the pressures that percolate down. So this is the reality of the startup world, that there's a lot of dynamism, but there's also a lot of immaturity that causes so much misery and pain down to the operations.
So you advise them to make sure they sort of protect the operational level from these pressures, so they can stay focused on delivery, product, etc.
So Kim, I wish that there was a way to isolate the operations team from all the vagaries of the market, from the investors, etc. But given that it is not the reality, here is a way in which we recommend that the startup world or the operations team deal with it. We encourage the leaders to have frequent meetings. The more frequent the meetings with the operations team, the more quickly they harmonize on what is happening and more quickly they update them. Now, with the discussions that happen, a common ground or a midway is found between the pivoting that is happening or the frequent changes that are so much a reality. A feedback has come from the sales team that the product changes are needed or the strategy needs to be changed or a new prototype has to be coming. So the operations team has to respond to them. That's the reality of the startup world. By having frequent meetings, I'm able to create motivation in the operations team to respond to them rather than create a demotivated setup which is either helpless or revolting at all times. So to that extent, and this is very consonant with the teachings that the Buddha also gives for a successful republic, which is meet often. And meet often, meet in harmony, discuss in harmony. When we do that and we start discussing more often, it kind of coalesces the team into a less reactive and a more productive setup.
Lots of wisdom there. Yes. So how do you differentiate leadership in a mature company, established company, and a startup? I mean, what's the difference of leadership and the situation they have to handle?
Kim, they are two totally different worlds. In fact, sometimes I feel if leaders of the established world or mature companies were to come into the startup world, they'd fail. Because, really, the reality of a startup world is the dynamism, the enormity of pressures that they face from the ecosystem. It's just so different. There are no systems. There's no backstop for a leader in the startup world. I mean, there's nobody apart from him or her who has to take the decision. So every decision surfaces up. It could be about whom to recruit, the job role of the person to be recruited, the compensation. And these are like just tip of the ice, small things that I'm talking about. To big things like, what product feature to take, what should the MVP look like, what product feature should be postponed for the next phase, what should be the valuation of the startup. What about the next investor presentation? So everything comes at once. And it's not that these people have been prepared for it. So to that extent, the startup world environment is far more challenging and dynamic than as compared to the mature world.
And yet, so what would you advise in terms of, how will a young leader deal with that variety? Is there any, they probably want to focus more on the product, the market, and how do they handle all the rest?
True, Kim. So, and this is a reality because there's just so much failure also that you have to deal with in the startup world. It's not a pathway that is, it's a pathway that is littered with carcasses and failures. So navigating failures, and these failures are also emotional. They take an emotional toll on the startups. So there come times when you are demoralized, demotivated, and you are facing a lot of pressure from all around. It's very, 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 very difficult to say a no and stand up for what you really believe in. But if there's one advice that I would like to leave for startups, that is that, in all these circumstances, if possible, go back to your vision. Go back and ask yourself the question, why is it that you started with this company? Why is it that you launched on this venture? And see if compromising that is something that will leave you happy. And if not, then find a way to stay true to your vision. Because ultimately, it's that vision that sustains you. And the moment your vision is gone, the inner motor stops. And if your motor is dead and it's no longer working, then it's it's existence. You're no longer living, you're just existing. So what's it? It's not really worth it. Fight to preserve that vision, fight to keep that motor alive. Find ways to take help from your team, from your mentors to to negotiate solutions such that the motor is not compromised, your vision is not compromised.
Thank you, Bharat. These are, I think, words which will carry a long way for young leaders. That really they should always go back to their vision. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for joining this podcast today.
Thank you so much, Kim. It was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you for asking such lovely questions. Thank you.
Thank you.